because it just, the camera would block. You pointed to another corner of the room and you had your picture.
I don't believe in ghosts. I never have. But it was a good story to shoot, and they had all the evidence visually for me to capture on film. Except that something happened which kind of spooked me, because on one roll of film that I shot, in the particular room where they first spotted the ghost, there was about 4 frames or 5 frames of film progressively fogged down to the end of the frame, giving it a ghost-like appearance, especially Joe Hyams, who was in the shot. And when that was processed and I took a look at that, I thought there was no way that could have happened either by some body in a lab or whatever. Usually it would happen at the beginning of a roll, where you had access to light as you loaded a camera. But to appear in the center of a roll, frames, I think it was 15 to 18, something else had happened that I couldn't explain. And I spent years as a photographer, and that had never happened to me before. So being a skeptic when I went in, coming out, something did happen in that house.
Then, a very interesting thing, one of the psychics who went through the house said, I get a strong feeling that there's going to be a fire breaks out in the dining room, and within the next year, the owners of the house, whoever they are going to have to jump from the second story from their bedroom in order to avoid the fire. Well, I wrote that down. That was all part of the data. The article was published in the Journal of the American Society for Psychical Research, a very prestigious parapsychological journal, and forgotten about. But 8 months later, in the Los Angeles Times, there was a front-page picture of Elke Sommers and Joe Hyams jumping from their second-story bedroom window in order to escape from the fire that had broken out. The firemen could never detect how the fire started, but it did start in the dining room.
After the fire, Elke and Joe decided to move. Despite the house's history becoming known nationwide, it had no problem being resold again and again and again.
It's unnatural in a period of, I don't know, some years to change owners 17 times. And that's a lot of new owners. And everybody says, hey, ghost, sure, yes, sure. Like the people who had the party. They had a party, a Halloween party. They all came with sheets and who and everything. And then they said, sure, Elke, and Joe, they're crazy. And ghost, sure, ghost. They lived there about 2 weeks by the time. And stewardess. And they were sitting at dinner, at the dinner table, in the dining room, in said room, and making all kinds of jokes and saying, hey, ghost and woman. And they had a beautiful chandelier, which they had bought. We had a kind of pishke one compared to theirs. Really, I said, really nice, big crystal chandelier. And all of a sudden, it just went, whole chandelier came down and nearly severed somebody's arm. Little things like that to keep life interesting.
I would like to talk quite a bit about poltergeists because I understand them and have experienced them as very mischievous, kind of fun-loving spirits that don't do anything like what was described in that very fascinating movie, Poltergeist, which had a lot of drama and a lot of melodrama and a lot of macabre things going on. Nothing in that film related really to anything that a poltergeist does, except for that first very charming episode in the dining room when the chairs got moved around and there were certain places that got spooked.
Did you do this? You guys, asked you not to hold a chair.
However, let's make it very clear. I have never known a poltergeist to do anything evil, anything macabre, like taking a child out of its domain and bringing it into a closet where it's suddenly in another special territory.
Frank DeFelitta, author of Audrey Rose and The Entity, and also a Hollywood producer, once had a most unusual supernatural experience.
20 years ago, I did a documentary for NBC. It was called The Stately Ghosts of England. I went to England in order to have some fun with the lords and ladies and their haunted manors. I thought it was going to be a big kick, but it turned out to be one of the most horrifying experiences of my life.
During his first days of shooting at a reportedly haunted mansion, DeFelitta could get no image on the film at all. So he went to London and had the cameras checked out, as well as the film stock, but both were in perfect condition. NBC was ready to fire him and cancel the whole project. So in a last-ditch effort, DeFelitta decided to return to the haunted house.
We got to a place called Longleat on the southern coast of England, a big manor house with about 100 rooms. It was famous for having a ghost that walked in the third floor hallway, the corridor. It was known as the Haunted Corridor. We had a clairvoyant with us. His name was Tom Corbett. He told me that the thing that was wrong is that I'd asked permission of everyone but the essential people, the ghosts. Well, if I felt humorous at all, I would have laughed at that. And he said that the only way that I could fix it was to go up into the third floor corridor, talk to the ghost, and ask permission. Well, I did. I was so desperate that I actually went upstairs in the dead of night, and I asked, would you please let me make this film? Well, lo and behold, the next day, we got perfect film. I cannot explain it. I was not a believer in ghosts until that time. In fact, even after that time, I wasn't at all convinced of what had happened there.
DeFelitta set up a time-lapse camera in the haunted corridor, and what he caught on film just might be one of the rarest pieces of evidence as to the reality of ghosts.
It was a light that went from one part of the hallway up to a doorway in the forward part of the hallway. This light went from one doorway into another. I had to meet with the people, at least they wanted to meet with me. This was Thelma Moss and her crew. And they wanted to see this particular piece of film, and I showed it to them. Well, they were so enraptured by it that they remembered me the next time an important case came up. And that's when they called me up and told me about this very haunted house in Culver City, practically in my own backyard. And what I found when I went there were a lot of students and a woman, a very brave woman, a very simple woman, who was being beset by an entity